So we've been talking a lot about scales recently with the natural minor, the harmonic minor, the melodic minor, but now I want to go back and talk about chords, but not just any kind of chords. I want to talk about seventh chords, maybe chords like this, chords, seventh chords. Okay, so a seventh chord simply means kind of a chord with 4 notes, but in a specific way, okay? With 4 notes. As we've seen before, maybe this is a treble clef, we've seen a G triad like this. We said this was a chord. Remember, a chord is just a bunch of notes put together. So we've had this. Now, the important thing to notice about this is that they're stacked in thirds. That's what makes it a triad. That's what makes it a tertian triad. Tertian simply means they're stacked in thirds. 1, 2, 3 for a third, and again 1, 2, 3 for a third. Okay, that means it's a tertian triad. Most of the chords that are popular today are built from tertian sounds. Okay, so now what this means is we have 4 notes instead. Again, we're going to stay with the tertian thing of stacking in thirds. So if we do this, we have a G 7th chord, G7. You can actually write it just like this. Now, the reason why it's called G7, you might even see it like this with a little 7, so both of these are okay. The reason it's called a 7, even though there are 4 notes, is because we have a root, which is our first. We have our second in the space, right? This is our third, our fourth is here, our fifth is on the line, is this note right there. And our 7th is on top right there. Oh, we have 6. I missed 6. Okay, so we have a root, 1, 3, 5, and 7. A root, a third, a fifth, and a 7th. Just like that. That's why it's called a 7th chord. Okay, so this one is called a dominant 7th chord, the way it's spelled, but we'll talk about that in a second. We're going to learn 2 different ones today, dominant, and we're going to learn about the major 7th. The major 7th, which would look like this. And the only difference is, of course, this sharp. Now, how do you make these is the question. This was a major 7th. Major 7th. You could say major 7th chord. You could say major 7th, tertian major 7th chord, but that's kind of overkill most of the time when you talk about dominant 7th chords and major 7th chords. We already assume they're tertian, so dominant 7th chord. Okay. So what's the difference? How do you make these? Okay, so if you're in a key, let's go ahead and start with the key of G major. G major. We're going to have, or it doesn't really matter what our major scale is, if we use this notation with the notes here, or with a notation like this with the carets over the scale degrees, you're going to have 1, 3, 5, and flat 7 to get a dominant chord, to get a dominant 7th chord. Okay, to have a major 7th chord, all you need is the root, the third, the fifth, and the 7th. Okay, so the normal 7th, and remember in the key of G major, it looks like this. G major has that F sharp, so because the F is sharp, it fits in this key. G is 1, 3 is B, 5 is D, and 7 is that F sharp. So these all work in the key. Okay. Now, the reason it's called dominant is it's built on the 5th scale degree naturally. Here's what I mean by that. Imagine, if you will, that we're in the key of C major. Let me get a little bit more room down here, maybe not cut that off. We're in the key of C major, no sharps or flats, and we have our scale C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay, let me get rid of some of this. Maybe I can rewrite the, oh, that's the wrong layer. Uh-oh, okay. Let's continue anyway. We have our 3rd, our 5th, and our 7th of the C chord. The 3rd, 5th, and what am I doing here? Oh, that's the space. Okay, we're on going a little too quick, I guess. Okay, this is the root 3rd, 5th, and 7th of the D 7th chord here. We will learn this one eventually, but we're not covering that one today. I'm just showing you that you can make 7th chords out of any scale. degree. It doesn't really matter. You just take the same notes you know and love, and it works, right? Okay, this is gonna look a little hairy, but that's okay. Like this. There we go. Okay, so if you look right here, this is your 5th scale degree. If you remember, the 5th is called the dominant. And of all the chords found in a major scale, this is a major 7th. Maybe like this, major 7th. The 4th is also a major 7th. We can prove this because remember, we need 1, 3, right here. We need 1, 3, 5, and 7. In the key of F, F has B flat, so all the other notes are natural. So this one fits in the scale of F major, just like this one fits in the scale of C major. Okay, so both of these are both major 7ths. Now, the problem with this dominant 7th is it should have an F sharp in its own key, which would make it the major 7th. But because the F is natural, it's lowered from its traditional major status, if you will, and therefore becomes a dominant 7th. The reason it's called dominant, again, is because it's found on the dominant. The 5th scale degree is called the dominant, so it's called a dominant 7th. Everything else, these 2 are major, these 3 are something else. This one's major, right? Because it's also your 1st scale degree. Maybe I can do this. Major 7th, it's the same as this one, right? They should be the same. And this one is really weird. Remember, these are all minor, so that will keep them in common. In this case anyway, this one's diminished to begin with, so they can't be the same. It has a different thing on the bottom, right? Okay, so again, this is your dominant 7th. Now let's talk about what they sound like. Let's go ahead and make these again, and then I'll play them and we will finish up there. Okay, so we have G, B, D, which is our dominant 7th. You can write Dom 7th, same thing. Or G7 is okay. G dominant 7, just to make it really clear. Or you can have your G major 7, which looks like this with the F sharp here. Okay, so you have G major 7. You could write like that. That makes it really clear. Usually in really short notation, you can do G7 and G major 7 is really clear. There's not too much discrepancy. If you get into jazz, they use some different things. This might be just G major 7 like this, and this will be G. This symbol is used for dominant, this little delta symbol, but we don't have to talk about that right now. Okay, let's go ahead and see what these sound like, or listen to what these sound like. Okay, so if you have a G dominant, there we go, G dominant 7th, it sounds like this. And if you have a G major 7, it sounds like this. One more time, back to back, G dominant 7 and G major 7. Okay, so you have those 2 chords. They add different flavor. It's much more interesting than just a solid G major chord. But you get the little bit of tendency there with either the flat 7 or the major 7. Okay, so those are the differences. Another reason why this is called a major 7, if you're content with why this is called a dominant 7, but you're like, why is this a major 7? Well, if you look here really fast, this is a major triad, just like this one is. Of course, they're the same, major triad. But you also have this interval from the root to the 7th. And if you remember from your interval practices, from the root down there to the 7th here, this interval is a major 7th. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, as we've seen already. And because F sharp is found in the key of G major, it's a major 7th. Okay, so that's why it's G major 7. This is why it's G dominant 7. And those are the first 2 7th chords that we will talk about.